Hello there, my name's Card, and for quite a while now, I've been something of a progressive community activist and left wing organizer. And the single most valuable thing I've ever learned from everything I've done in this role is that your time is scarce and valuable, and that you need to use it pragmatically. If you consider yourself a leftist, and you live anywhere with even a modest amount of like minded individuals, you likely do your fair share of just hanging around somewhere like a community centre or a public library or one another's unfurnished basements, discussing and debating the finer points of your political philosophy. Sitting around, coming up with answers and discussing them with your friends is the great progressive pastime. And if you happen to be involved with any sort of activist group that takes itself a bit seriously, you might even hold regular, semi formal roundtables and reading groups to properly give yourselves a time and place to discuss things. And if you're a younger person, say still around high school age or so, and you're only just now discovering the organised left or activism more broadly, before you go out to find some fellow travellers to fall in with, naturally, you'll probably first try looking online for anything that might help you find some answers. In any case, whether you're talking things through with your comrades on a lazy afternoon, or searching around online for the answers to all your burning greenhorn questions, you're likely to end up hearing one particular reductive response: just read more theory. Every lefty knows what that means. Theory is essentially the canon of political thought, and in practice, what it means is mostly a lot of really old, really big, and really dry books. You'd be expected to look at stuff like Marx, Engels, Chomsky, Foucault, nowadays probably Mark Fisher and maybe Slavoj Žižek if you've got a sense of humour. And if you and your mates are more libertarian socialist types or self-described anarchists such as myself, undoubtedly Malatesta, Bakunin and Kropotkin too. I was reading this sort of stuff for years before I was ever in a position to go out and participate in and eventually organize real boots on the ground activism. And I have to say, after really carefully considering the matter, in retrospect, all that reading theory was actually completely unnecessary. Your number one grounding principle should always be one of pragmatic practicality, and I can easily see that now. And I can also see that you won't ever get that from just reading books. I'll try and keep this relatively short since it's a simple premise, but I will elaborate a little bit on why this theory is unnecessary. If you're a newcomer to activist spaces and you're looking to get involved, and someone tells you that you need to start with a reading list, firstly, just laugh in their face. Then, second, maybe even send them this very video. Whether what you want to do is lend your voice to a discussion on progressive perspectives, or something a bit more logistically involved, like organizing events or starting up collective action groups, you don't need to have read any of those old books to do it. And in spite of what some self proclaimed leftists will condescendingly tell you, everything of actual vital importance to a revolutionary political model can actually be intuited by any progressive adult. I'm completely serious. Go ask the crusty patchwork jacket guy in the pit at every local punk gig what he thinks of the electoral process or the police. Go ask the pink haired pronouns in bio chick who hates being called a chick at your white collar office job if she they knows what systemic oppression is. Go ask the old ladies in the second row at church, all of whom have been protesting war in the Middle East since the Carter administration, what they think about Western interventionism. I'm telling you now, every even vaguely left wing adult who hasn't laid down their brain on the altar of backing careerist political parties full of neo-lib hacks is already all but the perfect community activist. And frankly, if you get the rationale for your progressive activist worldview from a book, and not just from looking at the state of the world around you and recognizing intuitively that things aren't all that good right now, then you're getting into it for all the wrong reasons. Once upon a time, The rest of the hardcore lefties acknowledged this too. Malatesta and co. knew that the miners and the foresters and the steelworkers and the longshoremen and whoever they were talking to every day didn't want to, or have time to, read hundreds of pages of literature after their 14-hour workday. And it didn't stop him from talking with them and organising amongst them. With only the most minor emboldening and a little prompting here and there, any group of workers can turn into the sort of militant, strike-happy union that capitalists fear. At this point, I've practically only touched on the fact that you shouldn't need 100-year-old literature to tell you it's good to try and make the state of things better, and the fact that you don't need to spend thousands of hours reading stuff you already know when you could use that time for anything else, especially something like meeting up with the other lefties in your area and getting some tangible organizational work done. But if you really wanted to push the point, there's a bunch of other perfectly valid progressive critiques to make of reading this stuff, and of how the theory itself is often problematic. Try something along the lines of how expecting everyone to read this stuff isn't just unrealistic, it's arguably ableist too, because plenty of people just outright won't be able to, ever, and for reasons completely out of their control. Or how it's defending historic sexism and racism on account of the fact that all the canonical bits of lefty political theory always seem to have been written by and primarily for white men. Or even just call the authors anti-Semitic or something on account of the fact that Marx, Engels, Bakunin, and all the rest thought that skull-shape science counts as material analysis, and any of them were probably just one more embarrassing dinner party run-in with Ferdinand Lassalle away from calling for the expulsion of all Jews from Europe. But, getting back to my primary point, as an activist and lefty organizer, you never need to hold up capital T theory as some gospel truth. Just about everything you need to know to ground your personal political philosophy should come naturally if your heart's in the right place. And the practical logistical side of things will figure themselves out pretty quickly too once you actually start getting some real world experience. And remember, if you're ever scoping out a prospective group of lefties to work with, and anyone tells you otherwise, they're either a bit too politically big for their breeches and trying to gatekeep anyone who won't comport to their ideas by boasting of how many books they claim to have read, or, even worse, B, they're the sort of Trotsky or Lenin fan who thinks 99% of people are just two-legged cattle who need to fall in line behind a vanguardist leader, who is, surprise, surprise, themselves. That latter kind of theory fan are barely leftists. They're actually self-interested strivers putting on a vogue leftist aesthetic for their own gain. And anyone who tries to tell you that community solidarity requires a chain of command, whether explicit, implicit, elected, whether by common consent or otherwise, is lying outright to you. And those people should be dealt with just as you would deal with any reactionary. Just to make myself perfectly clear, I'm not advocating an anti-intellectual line here, and I'm certainly not saying we need to ditch the concept of reading altogether. What I am saying is, trust me, you're ready to start organizing right now, even without having read a single antique door jam book by some syphilitic Russian guy from 100 years ago. Value what you already know. Value your own intuition of what is and isn't right. And most of all, value your own fleeting time. And don't squander it just because you're being made to feel like you have to read things you're not interested in just to keep up appearances. With all that said, if you really think there's something I've overlooked in my analysis, feel free to leave a comment down below. Otherwise, thank you for listening, and I hope you've gotten something worthwhile out of all that. Once again, my name's Card. This has been Card Posting. Feel free to subscribe if you want, and either way, goodbye for now, and have a lovely day.